what do we know? We know that these are club signings that were made in recent days, Simon. It's been stressed to me there's no such thing as a Todd Bowley signing. Graham Potter's team was actively involved in every one of these signings from start to finish.
Good. I'm glad someone finally says this sort of stuff, because anything else that's alleged about what managers do and don't get involved with is absolute balderdash. Managers are involved in 90% of conversations about players, involved in 90% of decisions about players. There are exceptions, and they're stupid exceptions.
Well, Danny Murphy said, and you were with me when he said it, that these can't all be Potter signings.
Yeah, but Danny Murphy's never sat in a boardroom, never bought a player, never understands the dynamic between a manager and an owner. So he can't speak to that. All he can do is speak to about which dubbing he put on his boots. The bottom line is the reality of it is that Todd Bowley is not a stupid man. He may be breaking the mould. He may be testing the tried old methodologies of how you buy footballers and how much money you spend and what contracts you put them on. But there's no point in bringing a coach, and this term manager needs to be jettisoned. Right?
Yeah,
it's an age-old expression that is not reflective of where people are now. They're football coaches that look after players. Right? And so with that in mind, it would be ridiculous to go and spend 600 million quid on players if you don't have, or certainly 300 million pounds in this transfer window, which Potter's been involved in, a somewhat significant involvement from the guy that's going to work with them.
Exactly. And on that, Simon, they stress we're not really spending money here. Is my understanding they feel they're not spending money. We're making investments.
Investment. Yeah.
What's the difference?
Well, it's semantics.
Security for the player,
well,
stability for the club.
It's only an investment if the player happens to be worth the money you've paid for him, right? So with that in mind, it's an investment that's structured upon a degree of proper due diligence, proper investigation into the player, and an understanding of the football club that you're trying to build. With that in mind, the investment criteria, especially with footballers, is a little bit iffy, and Todd will turn it into a language as an investment because it's money, £100 million on a property, £100 million on a football. I know which investment I would probably say is more bankable, but notwithstanding that, the business of sport, they're looking at players, they're capitalising them over long contract periods, they're thinking about what they're doing, and they're determining that their biggest asset, which also could be their biggest liability as well, is ultimately their biggest asset, which is the player.
So, Martin, we know they've got a World Cup winner in Enzo Fernandez, and the deal was done minutes to go. The deal is this: £30 million up front with 6 further instalments. But they were sweating a bit, Martin, on the Fernandez deal, so much so that the contract came through with about 7 minutes to go until the deadline the other night, and it was signed off with about a couple of minutes to go until the deadline. And it's our understanding that the Chelsea ownership were on FaceTime. At the end of the day, the player had to be taught how to use DocuSign because it didn't load first time on his phone. So it was a frantic end to the night. And
Chelsea were pushed to the limit, Jim.
Negotiations weren't heated, incidentally, but they went down to the last moment with Rui Costa. On you go, Mark.
It's interesting you get Simon's perspective in terms of, like, you know, we're going to pay all this money, and we've seen Everton. Of course, that's not always the answer to the solution to the problem. I'm looking at it. I'm hearing the manager who. By and large, this is a manager who likes to be patient with his players. He's been at Brighton, he works with them, he nurtures them. He's going to be looking and saying, when he says there are awkward conversations, nothing should really be awkward in the dressing room, but obviously, clearly, he's not comfortable with the situation he's going to be in. It's going to be challenging there's signed 8 players. I think only 3 of them can actually be registered to play in the Champions League, Jim. So you're looking around at how quickly you're going to be able to, this season, how are you going to be able to make those decisions in that breakneck speed time? So the manager's going to have to be very quick in identifying all those players that he wants, his 11 that he wants. I don't think it sits. Maybe it's why Tuchel left.
He already knows
maybe
that.
Maybe it's why Tuchel. Maybe it's just it's why Tuchel left. An outstanding manager who won a Champions League, he won the World Club tournament, came runner-up in the League Cup and the FA Cup, and finished 3rd.
I don't think that's the reason. I don't think that's the reason at all, Martin.
Currently, they're 21 points behind the leaders. Has this club got better? Has it got better?
Do you not think
since they changed the manager? I mean, he's been put maybe in a difficult situation, Simon.
What you're assuming,
as nice as it is to be in this situation,
is that Graham Potter is so obtuse that he wouldn't be saying to the potential owner or the actual owner of his football club, these players that you're buying, potentially these ones would go into my Champions League squad. I do think it's not beyond the gift of this guy to think laterally and go, I tell you what, we're bringing 8 players in. Of the 8 that we're bringing in, I can only pick 3 in the Champions League squad. So these ones are my priorities because we're playing Champions League football. Do you not think possibly in a grown-up world that conversation could have happened prior to purchases?
That's one thing, but I'm talking about, is this healthy?
Why is it unhealthy?
You want competition for a realistic chance to be in the team, and you want healthy competition. So you kind of try to create the right type of environment. If there are 10 players who've got no chance of actually being in the team, I think it's one of those. If you find yourself, You want to be in that team early. You want to, but now the decisions are being made. If you find yourself outside of it, you're going to have to be tough and strong.
But that's a silly argument, Mark. And you'd be sat here on the other side of this conversation saying the healthiest teams have 2 players for every position. So now they've got 2 players of world-class level, maybe even 3 for position.
Yeah,
you're now going to make the argument
but
that
not
that's
overnight.
not healthy.
Not overnight. It feels like it's been thrown together.
Well,
until we see a plan emerge.
Okay, let me take
and
you
a
back.
picture of it.
I don't think it's thrown together.
Let me take you back to
well,
last January.
Let's see. Only time will tell.
Well, let me take you
They're
back
10
to last
points
January.
outside the top 4.
Well, let me take you back to last January when you're sat in there tab thumping about how quickly Newcastle have got to move to buy players. Make your mind up.
No.
Which one is it then?
That was a very different situation.
Why then?
Were Chelsea really? Was there much wrong at Chelsea before this manager took over?
Well, clearly.
Clearly?
No, not really.
Well,
I've just told you that. I told you what they achieved the year before.
The club had just been bought out of an absolute chaotic situation, which you would say on a different argument, what happens in a boardroom affects the players. Of course, when it doesn't, right? So they've come out of a chaotic situation with an ownership model.
Is it not chaotic now with the number of players they bought?
Well, it depends on your view.
This is incredible.
Some people would say...
This is an incredible amount of money that they've
I think
spent.
it's very methodical, Martin.
But that's
I must
their
admit,
money.
I think
It's not
it's
the
been
manager's money,
very,
is it?
very methodical. And we'll talk about it. That's
You
honestly,
have inside
that's
information then, don't you, Jim?
That's what the club believes.
Probably.
That's what the club believes.
Well,
and our information is that the people at the very top who are making the decision believe that every decision has been made with a huge amount of thought and preparation with it. But we've been talking about strategy. And Simon, sources close to the ownership, we understand over £500 million was spent in 2 windows.
Yeah.
So was this always Chelsea's strategy? They tried to fill obvious holes in the first windows. Koulibaly for Rudiger. Fofana was the Christensen replacement. Sterling was brought in to fix the issue, as they thought, over goals. And then this time around, they feel we had to energise the club. I think there was a feeling that they had to complete a list of what they wanted to do, and that list has now been completed. The rebuild is now complete in the eyes of the ownership. Do you think that's true?
Well, also... it needs to be in the eyes of the manager that he's got the tools to be able to do the job they brought him in to do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like the level of spend. I don't like it any more than I like the observations that I've made about other football clubs, whether that's Manchester City or whether it will be Newcastle in the future. I don't change my view. I think it's a remarkable level of spend. I also think the argument that rages and will continue to rage, and I think it's a fair argument, is have Chelsea overpaid for players? Did they overpay for Cucurella? Did the ownership model that was keen to make an impression and put its foot down into the perspective of rebuilding Chelsea back to being an elite football club or continuing to maintain it as an elite football club has overpaid? I think they have. I think they've had their pants pulled down a few times. But who doesn't? Who doesn't walk into a new business and learn with their chin in their checkbook?
You get yours pulled down.
Well, absolutely.
If you like, and that's quite a thought in itself.
No, it's not the nicest ones, is it?
But in a way you did when you were at Palace,
Of course
presumably.
you do. You find out later on that the things that you thought you knew in a deal were actually very different to what the deal actually was. But you learn those things, and you learn on your own time, in your own dime. What Chelsea cannot argue about is the unadulterated commitment of the ownership. Now, whether that has the same effect, and it does have the same effect, it'll have the effect that I don't like on football, which is hyperinflation. It'll have the effect upon wages. It'll have all the negative effects that I don't like. So I don't give a Chelsea a pass on this. People are saying, well, if this was Middle Eastern money, you'd have something to say about it. I have something to say about it with Chelsea as well.
Yeah.
I don't like it.
What about long contracts? I mean, Fernandes, 8.5 years. Apparently their view is building stability is the most valuable aspect of that.
But primarily Todd's version of that is getting players on contracts that can capitalise the value so they meet financial fair play obligations. That's why they're putting them on longer contracts.
But it's a model that's used in the US.
It's a model that's used in the US, and ultimately what's a model that's used in the US that we don't want to see over here is no relegation. So there's lots of models in the US. They're not the blueprint for everything. And we've got a thriving and surviving Premier League far before the American involvement in it. So I'm not suggesting that what they do in America is good or bad. I'm indifferent to what they do in America. Football's different. They have drafts, they have a different structure, they have a different dynamic in American football. We don't have that here, and we certainly don't have that in the MLS. So with that in mind, I think they've overpaid. I admire their pluck. I don't like the ramifications it has for the rest of the football pyramid, because it will have ramifications. But if you're going to turn the lights on, and in smaller terms, comparatively, I walked into Crystal Palace in my first season and spent 10 or 15 million quid on players, which would have been equivalent in today's money to about 150 million in the Championship. So I did something similar, because you want to go. You want to give the manager the tools. You want to be able to say, right, I'm here now. We're building a football club. Here is this embarrassment of riches for you to go and do your job. No, it didn't, because I made the wrong decisions and I bought the wrong players and I listened to the wrong people. Now, Todd Bowley's in a very different position to me. Todd Bowley's 20 years older than I was when I bought the football club. He's also far more financially astute than I am, and far greater economics, and bought a far better football club.
Has he got more money than sense?
Well, that's all relative, isn't it?
No one's going to say no.
No
one's going to say no.
Musk buying Twitter for 44 billion.
No one has said no was going to say no to all these signings. Every football club out there would want to do this and touch in this. But the wisdom of this, I'm troubled by it. 8 years. So you're the new. So let's say it seems to me they're presenting now the idea that the manager's been a part of this.
What's that got to do with you? I don't
just
understand.
A minute. I'm
the
just
wisdom
giving
of someone's economic decisions.
I'm giving a view. You giving yours. I'm giving mine.
Okay.
So we're looking here and we're saying, okay, the manager now is suddenly, don't forget he's been a part of all these decisions. Okay, right? It's like they're putting it out there to say, well, when we get rid of him, he was a part of all these new players that came in. So it's like they're waving a flag at that. So so he's complicit with this. We're going to make ultimately he's to blame if it goes wrong. They're passing the blame a little bit here. I feel potentially in the future.
What a silly observation.
8-year contracts.
What a silly observation.
How do you get rid of any of these players if they don't fit in?
Why would you
got an 8-year contract?
Why would you start from the cynical perspective of saying that because someone's included in the conversation, that's blame attribution?
If I can just jump in here, Simon, they have stressed, the ownership stressed that Potter is a man for the long term, Martin, and the Champions League qualification.
It seems that you're kissing the backside of Chelsea Football Club here.
Let me finish. The Champions League qualification or otherwise doesn't impact his future this season.
So it doesn't affect.
Doesn't impact his future.
Well, let's wait and see then. So you're telling me if they don't make it to the Champions League, you're telling me if they go out, all the
that's the feeling within the club.
Well, let's wait and see, Jim, because I can tell you now that it's going to be a huge pressure that's coming on the manager when you spend this quite a money.
Oh dear.
Yeah, but who's bothered? I'm just explaining that I don't.
But critical thinking is the most important.
This might all work out brilliantly. And eventually, if you spend enough money, it turns around.
But Mark, what's different? Sean Dyche,
this is too much all at once.
Brought in, or Graham Potter, who now has a plethora of choice.
They can't spend any money at Everton because they spent so much in the past.
Well, interestingly on that, do Chelsea need to look at aspects of satisfying financial fair play? I think, it's my understanding, Simon, the ownership there is confident that they have lots of ways to solve whatever challenges come their way.
Well, let's be clear. They will know what they're doing economically. Now, whether they're buying the right players and whether 8 years puts a situation where a player gets into comfort zones or whether it manages elite players, if they recruit properly, and Martin will pontificate, and so would I, and be right to do so, if they've recruited properly. But if you've got a player on an 8-year contract and 4 years into his contract, Real Madrid come knocking on your door, guess who's in charge of that particular conversation? The club that holds the player's registration. Of course, the flip side of the argument is, if they don't recruit properly and they get a stinker in there, they've got an alternative problem. But given the amount of money they've got, they'll be able to take those situations and potentially trade players out, take losses on them, take views on them, move people along. I don't think they're here to play. I think they're here to stay. Yeah. And that means you need a proper grown-up in the dugout that understands the ramifications of working for big boys in big boys football now. And this is all about money, £500 million on transfers, managers on £10 or £15 million a year. Yeah. In any other walk of life, anybody that's paid £15 million a year or £10 million as a manager is the full McCoy.
And Martin, what I would stress, and no one's being a mouthpiece for Chelsea here, you're wrong in that. But we have a bunch
it seemed like you were, but anyway, that's okay.
Just my view.
Just my view.
You finished?
Just my view.
We have a bunch of information that we're putting out there because we know we're on factual, secure ground to put it out there.
Yeah.
They're club signings, Martin. It's been stressed to us. These are not Todd Bowley signings. Potter's team was actively involved in every one. Yeah. Now, there's nothing more to be said after that. There it is. It's in tablets of stone. Yeah. And then we go forward to find out what the actual upshot is.
Yeah, let's see. Let's wish them well.
These people, though.
It's certainly going to be exciting times for Chelsea. But it's about managing the situation he's in. And Sean Dyche, yes, would dearly love to have that same issue now, wouldn't he?
Can I put this to you, Martin? That's why Potter's got the big job. That's why he's paid the big bucks to cope with this situation, which many managers around the world would welcome with open arms.
Yeah, but when you look at it in the cold light of day, take a step back and look at Chelsea football clubs a year ago. Do you think they really needed this amount of investment? Do you think they really needed to change the manager?
Yes.
Do you think they needed to?
Yes.
What, just after winning the Champions League? After winning the World Club tournament?
Based upon my understanding of the way Thomas
Tuchel... How far away were they?
Do you want me to answer the question? Based upon my understanding of how Thomas Tuchel conducts himself, yes, I do think they need to change the manager.
Again, that's hearsay, and that's your opinion.
No, it's not hearsay.
Tragically, it's not, Martin.
No, it's not hearsay,
No, tragically, it's not.
Maybe he should come on and defend himself then, because you're putting him away.
Isn't he? He's welcome to do whatever he wants.
I think he's a successful manager. Deserves to defend.
One thing that we do know, Simon, is that the people at the top at Chelsea should not be underestimated, because the phrase I've been hearing is these guys are not here to screw around. You don't make investment and commitment to Chelsea to mess about.
Yeah, and where I think Martin is right is that's all well and good. That's not a recipe necessarily for guaranteed success. You don't know this landscape. You don't know this space. You don't know this industry in this country. There's something unique about English football, and you are just as susceptible, as proven by Martin's observation about Fahid Mashiri, that you can spend as much money as you want. If you spend it badly, there's going to be consequences for everyone. Look at the state of Everton. So Martin's point is well made, but critical thinking evaluates. I don't like the way he prices in people's perspective. No one wants to hang a manager out to dry. They brought Potter in against a backdrop with everybody going, what? They want him to be successful. They want to give him the tools to it. So it shouldn't be priced in that they're hanging him out to dry by the nature of saying he's involved in his decisions. So he should be. If he's not, then that's something different. And if he is, where's the problem?
Okay. I think the ownership want to make Chelsea the top club in world football. We'll see if they do. It's 11:15.
Jim White and Simon Jordan. Monday to Friday mornings from 10 on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.